Hey y'all, happy new year to those who, make January 1st their new year. I will say happy 2023 personally because I have resolved that this is not the new year for me. But hello, welcome. Happy 2023. And I hope it is treating you well so far, and I hope you're treating yourself well. Hopefully, you're being good to yourself, and you are having a smooth ride into 2023 so far. I'm really excited to talk to my guest today. We always have the best conversations, like the best. It's like soul food when I get to talk to Brittany Janae. And so I'm looking forward to you all getting a glimpse into some of what we talk about. Joining you all today from the Center Club in Baltimore. And I'm hoping that the noise level stays low enough. I was in my office, which is a couple floors up, and the internet is not internet for me today. So came down to the Center Club so that I could be here with you all for this Well Women Wednesday. If you get our newsletter and get our emails, I put out a special message today, and so hopefully you got it. If not, definitely join our mailing list. So the link is in our bio to just join our mailing list. We send out resources, we send out helpful tools, we send out inspiration, and we only email you once a week unless we have something major going on that we want to make sure you don't miss. But that first one of the year from me went out today, and I was talking about, so it's titled Reinventing January, and it is all about my decision to not make January the new year for me because it doesn't really align with me energetically. And so I talk about the what and the why, but also how I have, sort of recreated what the new year means and is for me. Sort of maybe give you some tools and tricks if you are also someone who really struggles during this season, struggles with winter. And I will say most of us melanated folk are not getting enough vitamin D ever, really, but definitely not during this time of year. And so yeah, we've got to do some things differently and make sure that we are taking advantage of the opportunity to own our energy as entrepreneurs and align the way in which we show up with what works for us, recognizing that we don't have to just model what we've always known, that going into being in business for ourselves is an opportunity for us to recreate, reinvent, and to show up differently. And that's a part of what I want to talk about today with my guest, Brittany Janae. So welcome again. This is Well Women Wednesday, the first one of 2023, and I am Nakeia Drummond. I'm founder and CEO of the Well Women Entrepreneur Leadership Lab. If you don't know us well, I hope you will get to know us. We are a membership network with members in different places across the country, but we are heavily populated in Baltimore and the Detroit area. We've got members in Atlanta, we've got members in DC, we've got members in Charlotte. So we're spreading out, and we are here to support Black women business owners in the early through growing and scaling stages to build the business of your dreams on your terms. We are holistically supporting Black women.
Anything else?
Thank you so much. No, I'm good.
Good to go?
Yep, thanks, TJ. All right, I'm going to invite Brittany Janae on, and we're going to get this conversation going. I invited my good sis in, and hopefully the internet cooperates with me. Brittany, where are you? There you are. Hello, beautiful.
Look, I feel like I haven't been, social media outside. So this
Welcome back outside. Welcome back.
I was legit. I was reflecting on it today, um, that one, I have not had from a few celebratory moments. It was certainly not, not on social. it was something, there's just something I feel energetically like, yes, this is alive. And this feels significant, just like from a like journey and season perspective. So yeah.
Well, yay! I'm glad I get to be a part of that.
I,
Always glad.
I was even reflecting on the fact that this was like rescheduled. I'm like, wow, divine time
Hmm.
here. Like, yeah, so well, I mean, we'll get it.
Yeah. How about that? Yeah, we were originally scheduled to talk in what, November, I think it was.
In so much. So I think I mentioned this before, but I do like process, get my and I did that just to kind of like prepare my mind and spirit. I realized how even from like a mindset and under like my experiences, my um, reflections from November would look different, feel different.
Hmm.
You know what I mean?
Hmm. Yeah. No, for sure. For sure. That's beautiful. Oh, I'm excited to hear all about it. Let me make sure I have my internet. Can you hear me?
Oh yeah, I can.
Perfect. All right. So you didn't get to introduce yourself. We just jumped in because that's what we do, right? Like we just go for it. So I want to make sure you get to introduce yourself, introduce the work that you're putting out in the world, the business, the brand that you're building, the legacy that you're building. So who are you? Because everybody's like all in on this. I told you we could all listen to you talk all day. Your voice
Okay.
just says like, listen to me.
So so the question like, who are you? And maybe like probably over the last 3 years, I've actually used that question or my response to that question as like metric just for like my sense of presence. Like to
Hmm.
what extent am I feeling like present and clear about myself and with how and with the degree of clarity like I answer that question. And so that was part of my journaling. Like this is about, you said poetic. Like I feel like this is about
Yes.
that was literally, and I promise I'm gonna share um all the like brilliant and beautiful work, and I want to share like authentically, like when I think about,
Hmm.
and specifically as it relates to like all that follows. I am today, like
Mm.
moment, like in this moment. I wrote,
Hmm.
I am, I am grounding and cleansing.
Mm.
I am purging and in tune with my spiritual self.
Mm.
I am, and this feels relevant to business, I am striving for ways to feel and stay aligned with my values, my purpose. Um, I am remembering significant week. And so, specifically as it relates to my evolution and this story that we'll tell about just like being and coming into entrepreneurship. Um,
Mhm.
January 12th, so tomorrow was, we'll talk about this later. When I think about next year, when I think about entrepreneurship, grief comes up. Um,
Mhm.
Yesterday, I mean, tomorrow would have been the year anniversary, uh, or will be the anniversary of me taking my grandfather to the hospital for the last time.
Mm.
And that feels,
Mm.
I'm like remembering that and like honoring that, like this week, even as I like realize since body and like how I'm engaging with people. Um, I'm reorienting, like reorient.
Mm.
I talked about grief, and I shared this with you in another conversation, Nakeia. I'm orienting my understanding of like life and death and action. One of
Mhm.
the things I shared y'all in conversation
You're
with,
cutting out. You're going in and out for me, and I
oh,
don't know if you are for other
oh,
people. So,
how about now?
can you all hear
Oh, my
me
phone.
clear?
How about now?
That's better.
You know, I was like trying to figure out if I should sit this up on something. I had it on my desk, but I'll just hold it if this is
No,
fine.
that's perfect. That's perfect. I thought it
So
was my internet.
no, it's probably because of the way I had it sitting. I feel like y'all
Oh,
gonna be all up
perfect.
in close and personal now.
Mhm.
But yeah, I'm reorienting. So I'm like even reorienting in my understanding of like transitions, life and death. I shared with you earlier this week that I've always understood like life, death in the context of that binary, and was recently invited to consider life, death, life. And when
Mhm.
I think about and process even my journey from like being a full-time worker to entrepreneur, the grief associated with that, like I'm honoring just like that reorientation, like in the now, and it's helping me just experience this season with greater clarity and from just like a place
Mhm.
of love and abundance. Um,
Mhm.
I am, and this is where we get into the stuff I feel like that perhaps resonates most with work and business. And so I am Black woman, Black wife, which is new, and mother.
Mm.
Uh,
Yes,
I
congratulations on the white card.
I am like genuinely in love with Black people. So much so that I have like deliberately, centered my practice around, that very thing. I
Mhm.
am by trade, or I guess profession, a workplace equity and justice practitioner, instructional designer, facilitator, um, an advisor. I am creator of Liberated Love Notes, which next month, I'm sorry, will be 2 years old. Liberated Love Notes, for the folks who may not be familiar, is an affirmations card deck, critical reflections for the culture that was started out as a love project um, while I was still working full time, and was certainly a byproduct of just my lived experiences as a Black woman, you know, doing the work of diversity, equity, and inclusion while also experiencing a social context that felt harmful and draining, and like wanting to sow into myself and those around me, to be responsive to that. Um, Liberated Love Notes then evolved into In Loving Accountability, coaching and consulting. I don't know what I call myself. I guess founder, steward, right? Like, you know what I mean? I've never been a fan
Okay.
of like chief title, you know what I mean? So, but that
Titles,
is,
yeah.
yeah. And that work. So in loving account, I've been full time now. So April 15th, so 9 months, full time entrepreneur for 9 months now. And you know, um, certainly a blessing, because if you would have asked me, like maybe even a year, a year ago, 2 years ago, would I see myself like full time, all in
I
as
didn't
an
get that.
entrepreneur?
Did you try again?
I might have been like, nah, that's not really the plan, right? And so
Still not
I
sure.
sit and process. I sit with that. You know what I mean? I hear Siri in the background. Is that my Siri or your Siri?
Yes, Siri,
Okay,
my
Hey,
Siri.
I'm about to
why?
say,
Sorry,
because I
girl.
feel like
No,
I don't got my watch on, but my watch does stuff like that.
no, my Siri. My Siri is trying to be all up in this conversation.
I'm like, I have Jamal as my Siri. So I'm like, yeah, that would sound like my Siri's voice.
Definitely mine. Definitely mine. No, so one thing I wanted to note to you tomorrow, because you spoke about tomorrow, January 12th. So tomorrow, January 12th, is the 8th birthday anniversary of NLD Strategic.
Wow.
So
Nakeia, don't even
yes,
get me to think talking about the number 12.
yes,
What?
yes,
What?
yes.
What? So we didn't talk about actual date. I heard you say that it was upcoming, but we didn't talk about the actual date. And so, damn, how divine is it? So that's so fast. So I was reflecting on just that, right? And so in as much as wow, I have so many reflections now. Um, I started to be more attuned to just like numbers. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Numbers as they showed up. It ended up being like a source of like comfort, but then also like confirmation. Um, and so I talked about 112 for the folks who just joined, being the day that I took my grandfather to the hospital for the last time. And in as much as it was like a physical ride, we were literally driving from Randallstown down to St. Joseph, Altausen. And I remember right before we got on 695 on Liberty Road, he says like something to the effect of, because he's sitting in my back seat, he's like, the devil is trying to attack my body.
Mm.
He's like, but darling, like he's not going to win. And I remember feeling like confident in that. Like I was really glad when he said he's not going to win. We referred to my grandfather as a man of really big faith, right? Just like really big faith. Like prayer was his probably first language. You know what I mean? Like
Mm-hmm.
primary language. And so
Mm. That's beautiful.
in as much as he transitioned, you know, certainly to another realm, I think about how like that ride was also this, like for me, like spiritual, like indicative of this like spiritual, I don't know, voyage, beginning, you know what I mean? Like um maybe even
Mm-hmm.
foretelling of like
Yeah.
attacks I might encounter, but this like assurance that like the devil won't win. You know what I mean? So like, right? And so even that, as I reflect on the last year, um, feels like good news. It feels like
Yeah.
good news. And to hear that it is also, look, let's talk about
Yeah.
life, death, life. It is also the
Right.
birthday,
Right. The
right?
birthday, the eighth birthday,
Right.
which is, so when you talk about numbers, eight being new beginnings,
Wow.
and it is
Wow.
it is the eighth for
Wow.
for NLD strategic.
Wow.
And I have been over this maybe 2 years ago started working on a new website for NLD and just could not like
Yeah.
move myself through. And so like now it's like about done, just needs to be turned on, new branding, all this sort of stuff. So like, yeah, sort of that
Yeah.
feels new as well. And then you and I have had some conversations about like, what does it mean to, move into a new phase
Yeah.
of leading your business,
Yeah.
right? Like, what does it mean once you are, you've done a thing for a period of time? What does it mean to like
Yeah.
elevate yourself in whatever way, like, or move into something new that you're being called to? And so yeah, so I feel a lot of the
Yeah.
same like words that you use to describe like sort of like this, like it's gonna be fine, and
Yeah. Yeah.
there's like a newness in it, and all of that. So yes, we both get to be reflective tomorrow on 112. So if some things come up for you, hit me up. I will do the same
Yeah. That's so
around
bizarre.
it.
I feel connected to you in a new way now. Wow. I do.
I feel like every time we talk, it's like another thing like
I
seals us in
know.
some way.
I
So no, that's really dope. So for, those of you just joining, and I don't think we mentioned this at all, like Brittany and I do some work together. Your journey over this last year, I have like, I don't know, it felt like very much like when you shared it with me, what was going on with at your job where you were, where I knew my meeting you, a part of your identity for me was your job, and also like what it would, the way you presented it to me was like, wow, I've never heard anybody like talk
know.
about the place in which they work in that
Mm-hmm.
kind of way
Mm-hmm.
that wasn't like their own business that they
Mm-hmm.
started, or like their family's business, right? Like it felt very much like
Mm-hmm.
a real key part of your identity.
Mm-hmm.
And I was also like excited about like the possibilities around it.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know if you mind sharing a little bit,
Yeah.
and without naming
Yeah.
the company or anything, but just about sort of where you were before, and like what led you,
Yeah.
sort of even this journey out, because you mentioned liberated love notes, but that was a part of like your own like being liberated in some ways, and it unearthed some things, right,
Yeah.
about where you were.
So I appreciate you like mirroring back or just like naming what you experienced in our connecting, specifically as it related to like how I saw myself and the relationship with, or my relationship with, you know, the institution and the work. And so I had the pleasure of spending, I mean, when I think I've been in DEI work for 12 years now. I spent 6 years working at a Black-owned, Black-led institution. And so for me, especially as someone who like grew up in like corporate America, that felt like promised land. You know what I mean? Like
Mm-hmm.
it felt like promised land. And I embodied this perspective that building upon and being a part of, you know, another Black person's legacy was just as much as divine, significant, worthy of the effort I would put in if it were mine or my mother.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? Or my dad's like, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, so that's what you know what I mean? And that's just off the strength of like, like I said earlier, like I just
You love
love
Black
Black people.
people.
Right. And so that was like prime time for me, like not stepping stone. You know what I mean? Like legit, that was
Right.
prime time.
Right.
And so much so that, and I mentioned this earlier, entrepreneurship as it is defined, you know, predominantly as creating something that is yours or that you own, right? Was never a
Mm-hmm.
plan. But I've always also like interpreted entrepreneurship as an opportunity to build from. You know what I mean? You ain't got to start from scratch. I
Mm-hmm.
think that is absolutely a you know, unlearning around or like an after effect of like colonialism and white supremacy that we got to be the first. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? Where we got to be the one to own, right? And so I
Right.
think there's just
Right.
something inherent to certainly my values, but even us as a people that sees the value in like how can I build, you know, upon it. So
Mm-hmm.
for six
Mm-hmm.
years, like that was it. Like, right? How do I use my gifts, my skills in service of
Mm-hmm.
building this institution? And you know, when I used the language earlier of like grief, certainly part of grieving was my grandfather, but because I had such love and also expectation for that season of my life, that was something to grieve. You know what I
Mm-hmm.
mean? Like,
Mm-hmm.
dang, there is a possibility that this may not go as planned. Now, when I look back, I can honor how that space was fertile ground for what is today, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so, spent 6 years in that role, was able to grow as a practitioner, expand my portfolio, work with amazing institutions and clients, like reach six figures, which like at one point was prime definition
Mm-hmm.
for success. You know what I mean? Like even when I
Mm-hmm.
think about how I had come to just like define arrival and arriving, like
Mm-hmm.
that was a marker. Like what? I done
Right.
surpassed six figures. Like that feels like it. You know what I mean? Or like enough.
Yeah.
Um, you asked me that today, right? Not so much. And so that space was absolutely fertile ground. And you use the language of unearthed. And so like also like unearthed just like some of the work that I needed to be engaging in as a practitioner. And then also some of the work that I believe in my heart of hearts that Black spaces must also contend with if we are to be possibility models that move beyond what corporate America and like white spaces be doing in these streets, right?
Yes.
And so all of
Yes.
that, so it's like, you know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
that 6 years that I was grieving, I go back to life, death, life, right? That's why it keeps coming up for me. Like, wow, so much came from. And so I remember 2020, right? And as much as the global pandemic had shut the world down, the diversity work was on and popping. You know what I mean? And so I'm now content. I'm now tracking and contending with the ways in which even an altruistic and values-driven space can prioritize productivity and profit over well-being. You know what I mean? I'm now contending with like, wait, like that's a thing. Like we're really about to do this. You know what I mean? Like I'm now like more aware of and processing that like dang, maybe this industry and work, if not held into account, can end up being another industrial complex that causes more harm than good if practitioners are. I'm like contending with all of this. I'm like, you know what I mean? Like clutching my diversity.
Yeah,
This is too
yeah,
much. All
yeah.
of this
Because
unearthing.
because how can Promised Land be doing that? You know, like
Right. It's just right. And so then it's like, I'm also just personally realizing that we're in the pandemic. Black bodies are being dehumanized and killed on social media, right? Screen. Like it's become like so front and center, Black trauma. And now I'm like, are we peddling? You know what I mean? Like now I'm thinking, now I'm even thinking more critically about the work. Like this feels insufficient. Training
right,
feels like, you know what I mean? Like this feels insufficient. And so that
right,
level of
right,
critical thought,
right.
in as much as it can be healthy, I also started to internalize it
Yeah.
as a being in person. And so that also ended up having me like process, okay, what is my relationship to my professional identity, right? Like, what is
Mm-hmm.
that? Because,
Mm-hmm.
and I think that's when I think about Liberated Love Note's origin story, like the first Liberated Love Note I wrote to myself was, I am not my work, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, that's what I came
Mm-hmm.
from, like very deliberately
Mm-hmm.
affirming that in as much as this is good work, in as much as this is meaningful work that's connected to my identity and lived experiences, it can't be the sole, way in
Yeah.
which I see myself. You know what I mean? I can't live in a way in which I'm conflating, or because I love the work, I don't deserve a break, or I'm now thinking because I love the work, I am not, I am, I am deficient if the work is falling short. You know what I mean? Like
Mm-hmm.
I have to,
Or because the work is so important, I can't take a break.
yes, yes, yes,
Right,
right?
right. Like you said, realize your own like God complexes, your own Savior complex, like
Yes,
all the same stuff that we
yes,
talk about for those of us who work in the space of diversity, equity, inclusion, or anti-racism. All the same stuff that we are like seeing so
yeah,
clearly elsewhere. It is so much harder to see in
alone,
ourselves and in the institutions and organizations we are building.
yeah,
And how many of us, like you and I talked about this briefly yesterday, how many of us
alone,
leave spaces with the trauma just to go recreate it
yes,
elsewhere in our own. We just go replicate what we know instead of pausing to do some unlearning and some unpacking, some
yeah,
redefining of who we are. So it's so beautiful that you speak about like how you started, with I am and these I am statements. If y'all haven't done like I am statements, like it's such a powerful, like I do them every so often, right? Like I just keep adding
mhm,
to this list that I have, because my my view of who I am like does change. It does
yeah,
evolve. There are things that 5 years ago I didn't feel worthy of saying I am that I would say
yeah,
today, right?
yeah,
And or that I felt like, oh, that's like not humble or whatever.
yeah,
Like it evolves. And so like so for us to spend that time doing the work that it takes for us to heal from the spaces that we leave, to unpack the ways, our own ways of being that, the ways of being that have been that we've embodied before we take them into new spaces, like, what's the word say, you know, you don't pour new wine in the old wine skins, right? Like it is some work. And so when we talk about like being an entrepreneur, it is such a spiritual journey, because like how you are showing up in the world, how you're showing up in your life is all up and through your business, and how you show up, what your business looks like and what it doesn't look like, and who you end up attracting to your business, both in terms of partnership and client. All of it is like, it's all the work, and it doesn't end. And that is, you know, the funny thing about it not ending is, I had a moment like right before the holidays talking to someone. I was talking to Dominique, and I had this moment of like, this like crazy revelation that it's not really that crazy or groundbreaking, but is for me. And I was like, oh my gosh, the work never ends. Like, you know, sort of this is the next layer of like my self-work, to be able to like unlock what is next for me to do. Like I can't, I know and am clear like that I can't do or get to my next place without like doing this work. And it's not that it can't happen simultaneously, but sometimes it does require like an interruption of everything, or a pause, right? And so you know, I really appreciate every time that we speak just how deliberate you are, even with your words. Like there is so much intentionality around how you know, how you show up. And so in the last couple minutes, I would love for you to share like more about like what those practices look like that allow you to be with yourself, right? So that you can create in the world and have a view of entrepreneurship that is not static or not one dimensional. What's the work look like for you?
Yes. And so, so in response to that question, one of the like ancestral anecdotes that I like to use, and perhaps you've heard it, by Audre Lorde,
I love her.
right? When she reminds us that the master's tools will never dismantle the master's house. And so I think about
Absolutely.
that as like an anchoring. Um, and then when I know I used like love quite a bit, and it like even shows up a lot, just like in my branding, right?
Mm-hmm.
And really deliberate in naming that, like the love, and as much as it can be defined as an emotion, my framework for love is one that is rooted in the work of Black feminist liberatory thought, that love is just not an emotion. It is like an uprooting, right, of systems
Mm-hmm.
of oppression. It is unlearning, right? It is asking myself and ourselves questions, um, questions that may feel like difficult as it relates to like how we got here, why we think the way that we do, who are we, and perhaps what have we forgotten about ourselves? What do we need to remember? Remembering has come up for me a lot. And so to answer your
That's a
question,
thing for me right now. Oh,
I have,
that's big.
so look, in my journaling, I made a list. I could share it here, or I might send it and lose it, of like kind of like rememberings of from 2022. Some of these relate to business. I
Mm-hmm.
can share towards the
Mm-hmm.
end if we have time. But to your question around like what keeps me, or what conditions have allowed for me to sort of like embody this like journey.
Mm-hmm.
One of it is uh, being intentional about what I consume.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And so one of the things that I started to realize, even in the work, and I started to get really critical about, was whose thought leadership, very
Mm-hmm.
practically, like whose thought, like
Mm-hmm.
if I did an inventory of everybody I'm citing in sessions,
Mm-hmm.
everybody's work that I'm grounding my practice in, you know what I mean? Best practice, leadership, to do, you know, all of that stuff. If I actually did an inventory, who are those people, right? Are
Mm-hmm.
they Black people? You know what I mean? Are they
Mm-hmm.
people who are whose work has been rooted in principles of self-determination and community and
Mm-hmm.
communal interest, like, right? Like,
Mm-hmm.
am specifically as it relates to like equity work, is how I'm doing the work taking into account power, right? And so it started with being really critical, like as a practitioner, whatever you know what I mean? And I imagine this varies by industry, but I think one constant in our system is that Black thought leadership is devalued. You know what I mean? It is not oftentimes used as like best practice in the mainstream. And when I even think about a lot of the certifications, if we're not careful that we run to, a lot of them are grounded in like white people in their principles, right? And so it starts with like being critical about that. Like, I'm gonna do it. I am gonna take inventory of who I am learning from and listening to. And so, and it can be really accessible. Shout out to, I mean, like the people who are just here in Baltimore. Like there's so many institutions in Baltimore who I would credit as just part of my intellectual lineage. And so as it related to like how I was showing up in equity work, I very much so leaned on the research of institutions like Leaders of a Beautiful Struggle. As it related to how I like reframed and started to like reimagine like my practice and how I wanted to show up as an advocate practitioner, I've benefited from the work of the Martins. And so the founders of the Blacks and Wax Museum, right? Work
Oh
around
yeah,
Black.
you've told me about that one book that was
And
really
it's not even
grounding for
written
you.
for me. It's written for people in social work, but I've been able to draw connections to what it means to be a practitioner working in service of Black people. Right? Even as a diversity and equity practitioner, I was very clear just about my aim, right? And so to answer your question, I'm very intentional about what I consume and take stock and inventory in what information like I am grounding like my work and practicing. So that's one thing. Another thing, like, so I consider myself, I used to like a recovering overthinker. My reframe has,
I'm a recovering pessimist.
I heard
You're
you
a recovering
say that, yeah,
overthinker.
right. And I used to like feel some kind, I had to reframe that. I'm more of a perpetual wonderer, y'all. I got hella questions. I have journals
You
filled
do.
with
You do
questions.
have hella
I got hella
questions.
questions, right?
I can always count on you
Like I
to
have hella
come with
and
a wondering or
and,
six.
and
No, for real.
I'm like, I love it when Lisa Clifton, also roots in Baltimore, Black woman poet, she has a passage where she was interviewed. She says, creatives, we don't create from a place of, having answers. We create from a place of like questions and like wonder. And that resonated with me, right? Because even as a practitioner, quote unquote expert, I'm like really mindful of not leaning into that like sage on the stage or like paternalistic, right? I know it all.
Oh, I love it. I love the sage on the stage because so that goes. What I say here oftentimes is the well is not a guru
Yeah,
model. There is no one guru who just has
yeah,
all the knowledge and
yeah,
wisdom and answers, and everyone must sit at their feet. Like, no, like there's so much to be gleaned from like
yeah,
everybody, right? Like, if we're not learning from every single person, like you're missing the mark.
yeah. That's why we be vibing
Yeah.
in here. So that was another thing, like really being intentional about like the questions, like accepting like for me, I experienced, and this is why the framing of loving accountability has resonated with me. When I was working within institution, especially as in a Black space, love language to me was being able to call attention to where I knew we could show up better. That was a whole love language. But if we're not careful, like if that is not practiced, if that is not embodied, then we end up leaning into, because power will do this to us, leaning into defensiveness, right? And or like deflecting and missing the opportunity to reimagine different, right? And so part of the conditions is me deliberately remaining in a posture of like wonder, certainly having questions, but even being open to like questions and experiencing that as a love language, right? You got to actually put that in your mind, especially when we experience closer proximity to power. And so what do I mean? Once you start leading a team, once you start founding a business, once you start scaling, once you start getting media, once you start to experience what the system deems as like power, access, money, network, resources, your critical consciousness needs to be up here. Because like
Hello?
literally up here. Because if not,
Literally.
you would be out in these streets. I just told my husband it's like being, you know, operating from a white frame in a beautiful black or brown face. You know what I mean? Like,
Mm-hmm.
and
Mm-hmm.
so that's the
Yeah,
posture, right? Like
that
one,
is
so
the posture.
you got to be here.
That is the posture. And you know what's so interesting about it is that because so the duality in it is that the expectation that if you have questions, or that fear on us that if we have questions, if we show up with questions not answers, then we are challenged and deemed, like not expert, not wondering. So this idea that you can't come into the room with a bunch of questions, you've got to come into the room with more answers so that you seem expert, and you are,
Mm-hmm.
sort of deemed that way and not challenged around like your worth and your credibility in the space. And that goes up too, right? So like, yeah, how do you like the balancing of that as you are elevated, the expectation that you know more versus that you know more of the questions to ask, right? Like that, like could that be the bar that like I am knowledgeable enough that I know the right questions to be asked,
Mm-hmm.
and not that I have all the answers. And
Mm-hmm.
that takes a certain level of like confidence, for sure. That I think that, sort of some people would see it as like not being expert, but that you're confident enough that like I know that I'm brilliant, right? That I can
Mm-hmm.
ask questions, and I can stand on that. I'm confident in that. Like that's a superpower. I usually ask people what their superpower is, but I don't even need to ask that. Like that's a superpower right there, because not everybody can feel the confidence of, wondering.
And and that's actually why, specifically as it relates to Black people, I feel like, well, not even feel like, I know, like mindset and sort of like even like the work of affirmation is critical. And so I think, yes, confidence, and I think it's also being able to discern what is system and culture versus what is deficiency in me. You know what I mean? And so like, because I think
Mm-hmm.
like lack of clarity around this. I'll give you an example. I remember like one of my strengths right now is I kind of got virtual down packs, virtual facilitation, so much so that I'm like, in person, what is this? But I think about, right, like, what is this? EDB, right? Right, like, I got all kind of games and tricks and stuff. But I remember a time, Nakeia, where that, like, especially when the shift first happened, I would get really antsy. And at the time I was leading a team, like really antsy and like on edge in a virtual setting. And a lot of it had to do with like what one I thought might happen, like tech, like, you know what I mean? Like shit might go down. Like, and I had to interrogate, like literally sit with, okay, let's just pause with this. Cause sometimes we'll get on edge and then it shows up in how we act interpersonally, and that's real ugly. You know what I mean? Like it's like so real. You know what I mean? Cause and that's another reason you gotta be in touch with your body too. Like, I can tell when I'm starting to get on edge, and the work is to settle that, not like murk out on my tech assistant, right?
Yeah.
And so
Yep.
I had to start when we first transitioned to virtual. I remember wanting to interrupt that anxiety and realizing it was less about confidence and more about the messages I had convinced myself people would interpret about me if something went wrong. And so, for example, if something happens with the text, they're going to think that I'm wasting their time, or they're going to think I am incompetent, or they're going to think that I don't know what I'm doing and no longer worthy of facilitating this space. So, you know what I mean? Like, because and then you really get to the fact, like, wait a minute. But, and I actually remember saying this before a session: if shit hits the fan, I'm still worthy of like facilitating this space. Like, if tech is wrong, my story and my style and what I am bringing to this space still matters. You know what I mean? If something doesn't go my way, I am still, working. And so like, and as much as that sounds like real, one of my friends describes me as like woo woo, and as much as it sounds like really woo woo, like, you know what I mean? Like that was significant.
No, like to me
Like I
that
had to
sounds so
train,
concrete. It
train
was so
myself.
concrete. Yeah. Yeah. No,
If
it's
this
similar to how
happens.
I like train myself as a recovering
Mm-hmm.
pessimist. It really is. Like I was
Mm-hmm.
telling that story maybe yesterday, like that, one of my friends started calling me negative Nakeia, and I was like, whoa, whoa,
I remember
whoa.
you said that.
And
Mm-hmm.
and I'm like, I didn't like that. And like I really trained myself because for every negative thing that I thought, I was required to come up with the counter to it
Mm-hmm.
during that period of time. Like it was over Lent, so it was a 40-day period, and like it shifted the way in which like what I go to first, what my default is. And so no, it doesn't even sound woo. It's like no, that was very concrete to me. Like, and sometimes things aren't that concrete. So like that's a very concrete thing, and concrete in the sense that like we have all experienced that, right? I
Mm-hmm.
experienced that yesterday, like
Yeah.
with my tech.
Mm-hmm.
Like, oh,
Mm-hmm.
I was doing something for the first time. It was the first early entrepreneur growth program session for this new cohort, and my screens were mirroring, and I didn't want them mirroring. I wanted one thing on one
Mm-hmm.
screen, one thing on another, and I had one of those moments. And so we do that. You're so right around like the reframing and the retraining of like what the messages even that we are telling ourselves that other people are thinking.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So look, you and I can talk all day. So what what and if we can wrap up in the next couple of minutes with there was so much said. There was so much we talked about, like that I am piece. So I would leave people with that. If you haven't done these I am statements of like, when people often ask you who are you or to introduce yourself, like that, like I am are two of the most powerful words ever.
And doing
And
so, and maybe and actually being deliberate, and like doing so where you are not leading with the typical, you know what I mean? Like things that may be associated with status, or perhaps you're doing and how you show up as a you know what I mean? Productivity, right? Like
Your
really,
productivity,
like,
yeah. Or even if you have to start there, because I think for some people, but don't allow yourself to stop
stop
until
there.
you've
I like
gotten to
that.
like 50 or 70 I
Mm-hmm.
am statements. So at some point, all that surface level stuff, that stuff is at the top because it's on the surface. It came out
Mm-hmm.
first. But if you don't allow yourself to stop until you get to some number that feels far, and you realize that I am infinite for real, right? Like when you realize that there, I'm good. Oh yeah, thank you. When you realize that you are all of
Mm-hmm.
these things that you don't even get to because you feel like you have to just be this stuff right on the surface, but you have no choice but to keep going. So that's what I would say for people who, because some people be like, oh, well, I can't think of, I don't have all those things to say. Go ahead and start with the stuff right at the top and keep going. So that was one like sort of
I
big thing that I
am, and
felt.
even I am from, right? And so I have like maybe this
Oh, I
is
haven't done that
in the spirit
before.
of like wanting to hold me accountable, like show up in more deliberate ways this year as a well community member. Like that's a really
Yeah,
strong activity that I facilitated. Like, who are you from? Like, who are
yeah,
you, and who are you?
yeah.
Hold me accountable to it.
Wow.
I have it, and I will
Yeah,
share the exercise as start point, because I do think that that has been part of, you asked me earlier, like the journey work as an entrepreneur. Lineage is a big part of that. And I'm not just talking
yeah.
about, biological lineage, just like lineage, what I have,
Mhm,
who I have learned
mhm,
from. And so I am from a start point. I feel like for self-reflection and just like critical
mhm.
building.
I love that. Yeah, I've never done that one, and I'm like, it sent me reeling that quick. I'm like, nope, come back, don't go there yet, don't go. But so okay, so I am from. We talked about this idea of we talked about so many things, but we talked about this idea of, working in spaces that, and leaving those places to start our businesses, to go lead in other spaces, and not pausing to reflect on, what we're taking with
Yeah.
us.
And so I think that, and I absolutely believe that anytime, specifically as entrepreneurs, so I am thrilled when I hear numbers of Black women that's particularly leaving corporate America. I am thrilled in starting businesses, and am concerned because there are not many places, spaces, communities, or time, it feels like, with intentionality to unlearn, to literally reprogram. And so just want to, like, for me, I remember I told you I thought Black space was promised land. I'm
Mm-hmm.
learning that Black space, where we're engaging and embodying the work to reimagine, it's giving promised land, right?
It's
Now,
giving it.
that's promised land, and that is, my hope. Even as you asked me the other day, like, what's the future? You know what I mean? And I was like, I feel like Liberty Levels and Loving Accountability is very present right now.
Mm-hmm.
I can't think future right now. It's just too much.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's what I feel like, or desire, and in building for Liberated Levels and Loving Accountability, the present, you know what I mean? That kind of space,
Mm-hmm.
that
Mm-hmm.
level of critical thinking, in a very loving and communal way, right?
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
and we can still
Yeah.
do that work on our own. Like, there are ways to do that on our own, taking inventory
Yeah.
on who we're learning from, um,
Yeah.
sitting with, like, tough questions
Yeah.
and being open to
Yeah.
embodying a
Yeah.
posture where critical or someone sharing feed forward is experienced as a love language and not an affront, right?
Mm.
Like,
Mhm. Mhm.
that's the key take.
Mhm.
That's the key
Mhm.
takeaway. That's the key takeaway,
That's the key takeaway. No, seriously. Yeah, and no, this is. Oh, I love this. I love this.
we need to
This could be a
stop.
whole thing. This is a retreat. This is a thing. So yes, thank you, Sha, for posting. So follow Brittany on Liberated Love Notes, as well as
Thanks,
Brittany
Sade.
Janae. And oh, that's Sade. I thought that was Sha. And in Loving Accountability. So thank you so much. Thank you for being in my life, in my world, in my sphere,
Love, love, love.
and sharing yours. And I can't wait to, sort of, we're going further this. This is, y'all, this was just a little taste.
You
I reached out to
told him the
Brittany
conversations
yesterday.
were good.
Yesterday, I reached out to her. It's so funny that we were talking today, because yesterday I reached out to her and I said, you have so much to offer. I need you to be present in this space with us. I need you to bring it here. And, how do you want to show up this year in this space? And then here we are, just kicking off this conversation. So I'm super excited and love you so
Love you.
much. Thank you for bringing it all here.
Alrighty, I'll see
Talk
you
to you
later.
soon. All right, y'all. Thanks for joining us for another Well Women Wednesday. This is the first of 2023. Really excited to have kicked it off in this way, because today, look at husband shouting out, "That's my wife." I know that's right. Um, Today was our first one of 2023, and it's such a great way to, like, kick off the year with reflection. So a lot of times we jump right into planning, but, like, reflecting on how am I showing up and why am I showing up the way in the ways in which I'm showing up, and does that align with my values, with who I want to be? Am I just bringing stuff that I thought I left behind in this new journey, or on this new journey, meaning new year, new business, whatever? Am I bringing it with me, or am I being, like, actually being critical about, in a loving way, about where I am and how I show up in the world? And I mean, what better work to do than that, to start a new year? So if this is the new year for you, definitely recommend I am from, and just stopping there, just pausing on that, and what are you bringing with you? What do you need to leave behind? What is no longer serving you on the journey? Love y'all. Talk to you soon. If you haven't read our email for today, Reinvents in January, personal note from me. I share my own process for, sort of learning that January has to be the start of the new year. And so, I get into the why as well as the how. But thanks for joining us. We'll see y'all again next week.